Tragedy Island earlier this year involving pedestrians and repeat traffic offenders have caused public outrage and raised questions about what can be done to keep those that habitually cause problems on the highways off our roads. This live broadcast and live stream of KΑKOU, Hawaii's town hall, starts now.
Aloha and welcome to KAKOU, Hawaii's Town Hall, live from the Harry and Jeanette Weinberg Multimedia Studio. I'm Yunji de Nies. It was a case that saddened and outraged many in our community. On February 15th, two students were walking to school in a marked crosswalk on Kapiolani Boulevard here in Honolulu when police say a driver hit both, then fled the scene. 16-year-old Sara Yara died that morning after the suspected driver turned himself in. Records revealed he had 164 traffic citations dating all the way back to 1996. We've chosen not to name him tonight as he has not yet been charged. According to court records, he was stopped 18 times for driving without a license, including in January of this year, just over a month before Sara died. That January case is still pending. He was also cited 23 times for driving without insurance, 32 times for speeding, 7 times for disregarding red light signals, and 4 times for racing. Over the years, he's paid a number of fines, but was never sentenced to jail time. The very same week that Sara Yara was killed, there was another hit-and-run case you may not have heard about in Kona on Hawaiʻi Island. That's where a 73-year-old man was in a marked crosswalk when he was hit and taken to the hospital in critical condition. Police say the driver fled the scene and was later arrested for driving under the influence of an intoxicant. That suspected driver is also a repeat traffic offender with 2 DUIs and was stopped for driving without a license or with a suspended license 5 times in the last 2 decades. So the question is, how do we keep habitual offenders off our roads? KAKOU means all of us, as in we are all in this together. Because any one of us could be in a traffic incident with a driver like this. We want to hear from you in our discussion tonight. You can email or call in your questions. We're also streaming live at pbshawaii.org and on the PBS Hawaii Facebook and YouTube pages. In our town hall tonight, we have a cross-section of people who work in our criminal justice system, from 2 police chiefs to Honolulu's lead prosecutor, defense attorneys, the paroling authority, and a retired judge. We also have the head of the State Department of Transportation, a substance abuse counselor, and the parents of 2 young people who lost their lives on our roads. So let's begin now. Chevy Saniatan is Sara Yara's mother. I think we're all familiar with what happened to your daughter, but before we begin tonight, I'd like to start with you and ask you to tell us a little bit about her.
Sara, she was one of my twin. She loved life and she loved her friends. She started golfing when she was 3.5 years old. She did a little bit of golfing in high school, but she ended up loving volleyball. So she started playing volleyball in high school. She loved going to school with her friends on the bus because they could just hang out before they get to school and talk story. Sara loved watching her NCIS and watching all these criminal cases. We thought one day she'd be a police officer or a FBI, but that wasn't her goal. Her goal was to be a computer engineer. She said she wanted to be like her cousin that's in Denver, Colorado, but she never made it there.
We really appreciate you being here tonight and for sharing some of her memory with us. Thank you so much. I want to turn now to Honolulu Police Chief Joe Logan. Chief, we know this case is still under investigation, so I'm sure you're limited in what you can tell us, but what can you share with us about this case?
So this is a very unfortunate case, and on behalf of the men and women of the Honolulu Police Department, our hearts and sympathies out to Yara family and the Werner family that's also here, and all those that have lost a loved one because of individuals that don't take it upon themselves to do the right thing. For whatever reason, they choose to do something that's different and not in coordination or in what society norms are. And so they choose to make decisions that cost other people's lives. This investigation is still ongoing. As was stated earlier, the individual fled the scene. was later arrested and then released pending further investigation. As you know, traffic accident investigations are different than other criminal investigations. They're a long process. There's a lot of scientific investigation requirements that are necessary to be able to provide all the information necessary to go for charges, and that's why this case is still pending.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are just surprised to know that it's taken so long and that it's still taken so long. That's why we've chosen, as we said off the top, not to name the individual. Typically, how long do investigations like this take?
I think Ben would probably be the better one to answer this, or Chief Ben, as he was the major of traffic division. But it's going to take quite a while because of the complexity of an investigation such as this. How is the vehicle operations? What mechanical issues or concerns are there with the vehicle? The measurements that need to be taken at the scene, and precise measurements of where everything involved, that the evidence that's recovered, how was that? So that's what really takes a long time as part of the investigation.
Well, let's go to Ben Moszkowicz now. He is the Hawaii Island Police Chief, but also served at HPD for a number of years in the traffic division. Typically, having done these investigations, how long do they take?
You know, like Chief Logan said, there are a lot of complicated moving parts. But that's also true in any complicated criminal investigation where there are crime scenes and victims and witnesses. And like Chief Logan said, this collision and all these collisions that claim the lives of family members and friends and neighbors and community members, it's easy to brush them off as accidents or they just kind of come and go in the news. But really, it's very impactful to hear and to be in the room and hear the story of the victim who actually perished in this collision. These cases are very complicated, and the investigators statewide are actually trained very well. They're trained to international standards. The challenge with taking a criminal case, which in this case a failure to render aid case, which is an A felony or a B felony case, the prosecutor's offices on all the counties have different charging criteria, right? So what cases they're going to accept in custody and what cases they're going to accept as add-on cases or cases that will be conferred at a later date. And most of that basically boils down to the offender's criminal convictions. So if you have someone who is a convicted felon or who's on probation or on parole or who doesn't have an address or it might be difficult to find or is a visitor, then those folks get bumped up the priority list, and those cases are typically charged a lot more quickly. Other cases where, and again, the suspect in this case has hundreds of traffic violations and infractions and maybe even convictions, but it's not really looked at the same way, I guess. And through no fault of the prosecutor's office, there are a lot of cases, and they're lined up there. But the investigation part itself can actually be done in a matter of weeks. What I've seen take place here in Honolulu and on the Big Island as well is a lot of times these cases linger for years, months to a year even, before the prosecutors have time on their calendar to get these cases conferred because of all the complicated science and other experts that sometimes we have to fly in experts from the mainland, and that's another aspect of the case. And to the prosecutor's credit, the reason that we do that is because we want to make sure that once we file that case, that the science and the evidence is rock solid. We want to make sure that case is going to end in a conviction. And so it's very important to put as much into that investigation as possible to make sure that we get that outcome that we want, so that hopefully there's a conviction and then there's some sort of deterrent effect at the other end.
Well, let's go to the prosecutor now. Steve Alm is with us tonight. The record of this driver that we laid out in that graphic, 164 citations, it's simply stunning. And I think when people see that, it begs the question, why was this an individual at no point over those many years sent to jail? When you see that, how do you react?
Well, because nobody's been charged in this case, that would be trying that person tonight, and we're not going to do that. But speaking in general, there are a number of irresponsible people who rack up lots of charges. And part of it is in the whole decriminalization effort that took place a couple of decades ago. It makes the system work easier. People get a ticket now, they don't have to go to court, they can mail it in. So often if people have 100 and something of convictions, 80% of them may be of that type. But when a tragedy occurs, and there have been horrendous collisions over the years, and you've got two parents here today, But I have to say, when the hit and run on Kaulana happened, I think it made a number of us agency heads look and see what can we do differently. And we have already changed our policies in traffic court.
Tell us about that. What have you changed?
Okay, what we are going to try to do is institute the concept of deterrence. And when criminal and I was a judge for 15 years, before you issue a sentence, and Judge Lee was as well, there are factors to consider, and that includes the person's record, that includes deterrence, that includes punishment that's going to protect the public. So we are going to, for repeat offenders, for driving without license, no insurance, we are going to be asking for jail time. Now that is not typically something that happens in state district court. It just virtually never happens. I found it very frustrating when I was a prosecutor there. I'm frustrated as the Honolulu prosecutor now. But we are going to be going to trial on a lot more cases, I think, because I don't think defendants are going to plead guilty if they know that jail might be in the offing. So a lot of these charges do allow for jail when you have multiple convictions. And so we are going to be asking for that. We are hoping the judges step up, because when it comes to violent crime, and you can ask the other law enforcement people here, I don't think deterrence works. Before somebody hits somebody over the head with a beer bottle, they're not thinking, oh, I might get caught, I might do some time, I might see Fred Hyun down the road. But when it's white-collar crime, political corruption, or people that are so irresponsible, they don't get a license, they don't get insurance, and they're thumbing their nose at the rest of the public, if they knew that they had a good chance of going to jail, I think that would stop some of that behavior.
Let's go to Judge Lee now. This is a question from, I want to bring in the audience and get some of this in as well. Thomas Nkula says, there's no question that anyone who does this should be prosecuted and kept in jail. Judge Randal Lee is a retired circuit court judge, now a law professor at Hawaii Pacific University. You know, Judge, do you think that the changes that Steve Alm is talking about tonight could make a difference? And what discretion do judges have? What's the judiciary's role in all of this?
Well, the unfortunate thing is it has to take a tragic event like this before people react. The problem with the system is that we are not being proactive in terms of, we know these things happen and we wait until something happens before we do something. But Steve is correct. As a judge, we like to consider all of the factors of a particular offender that comes before us. It's easy to say we're going to throw him in jail, but eventually that person will be released. And the unfortunate thing is, once that person is released, there's no way we can stop that person from jumping into another car. That's the unfortunate reality of it. Okay, this will happen again because the offenders generally feel that they will do their time, they won't get caught. I mean, if you just look at the cars on the road today, look how many expired safety checks, expired registration. People do not care because as Steve said, a lot of the offenders in district court generally don't get jail.
But you're saying that even with jail, you don't necessarily think that that will be enough of a deterrent.
Well, it's a step in the right direction. It will deter some. But you will have those offenders that will just totally do their time and disregard the law.
Can I add on? In preparation for tonight, I kind of asked the judiciary for some data. From their database. And this is, by the way, it's publicly available. So anybody can Google eCourt KAKOU or Hawaii Judiciary, and all this information is publicly available. I just asked them to correlate it for me so I didn't have to sort through all the records. Just curious if anybody on the panel has any idea, trivia question, in 2000, I looked at cases from 2017 to 2021, because most of those cases, driving without a license cases, DUI cases, they've run their course. The statute of limitations is either up or the case has been resolved. In 2021, statewide, we had 15,000 people who were either cited or arrested for driving without a license. Those are cases that actually made it into gyms. Those are actually cases that should have appeared on a docket somewhere. And I'm going to shock you if you don't already know the answer. Less than 20% of those people were convicted. which means 78 to 80% or more of them were dismissed or released or some other kind of disposition that it did not end in any kind of conviction or accountability. So absolutely important to talk about, changing the idea and changing the concept, but also really essential to talk about if we're dealing with a problem to at least identify what the scope of the problem is. Different counties are different and the numbers are a little different from county to county, but on Oahu we had a little over 10,000 driving without a license cases, and less than 2% of those people actually were prosecuted because 98.9% of those cases were dismissed. And I'm not pointing a finger at anybody in the room, but when we talk about the scope of the problem, that's a humongous problem.
Well, let's talk about how one goes about defending that kind of a problem. Teal Takayama is a state deputy public defender. You are someone who is tasked, of course, in our community, in our law enforcement system, everyone is entitled to a defense. When you encounter folks, the over 10,000 that the chief is talking about, what are some of the stories that you hear and what kind of a defense can you mount for that behavior?
Well, first, I think we need to make a distinction between habitual offenders and people that get behind the wheel and are dangerous, reckless drivers. In my experience, the habitual offenders, the people that are getting cited for driving without a license, it's a story we hear over and over again. It's expensive to have a car here in Honolulu. You have to pay for your car registration, you have to pay for insurance, you have to pay for a safety check every year. So if you fall behind on that, you get cited for that, you can't pay that ticket, you get a stopper on your license. Eventually, your license is going to expire and you can't renew it until you pay off that stopper. And for a lot of people in the community that are financially stable, that's not an issue. They can pay these things, they're fine, they go about their lives. But for most of our clients, they're not financially stable. So they have to make some difficult choices about whether to put food on the table for their kids or to pay their license stoppers. And I think most of our clients want to be compliant with the law. Most of our clients are not dangerous drivers. If their safety check is expired, they're gonna get pulled over. And it doesn't mean that they were speeding. It doesn't mean that they were driving recklessly. But they incur these fines and it just puts them into a cycle where they can never dig themselves out of it. And I think most of our clients want to find a way to be compliant, to maybe do community service or have some other options. And I think that'll take more than just the criminal justice system to help put them back on track. So that's something that we would love to see more of a community effort into doing. I'd also say that there aren't a lot of other options if you don't drive. So I understand we have a bus system, but for people that maybe work construction jobs or work nighttime hours, the bus is not a realistic option. And if you live in a place that isn't pedestrian friendly, you don't really have a lot of choices. And if you're trying to make money to pay your fines off, then you have to go to work. So it's tough, and I think that it's a question for a larger group.
I want to bring in Eric Seitz on this. He is a private attorney here in Honolulu. What are your thoughts about stiffening these penalties, and what do you think, how do you mount a defense for someone with a record like what we're talking about tonight?
Well, I don't think you can defend somebody who has that kind of record, to be honest with you. And I don't think I would do that. But let me say first of all, preliminarily, if I may, I'm very heartbroken by what happened in this case. I know people who knew Sara, whose kids went to school with her, who were deeply affected by this. I also live around the corner from the young man who is suspected of being involved in this, and I've known his family for 30-some years. And so I look at this as an incredible tragedy, and I hope that the community will embrace it from that standpoint. There is no way that I can comprehend going through this as a parent, and I don't understand how people do survive this kind of situation. But we as a society see these things happen, and we don't take them seriously. We don't go to the legislature or the city council and demand the kind of resources so that we can handle these situations at an earlier stage. The judiciary ought to be able to process these cases and see to it that there's follow-up, that there's counseling, that there's supervision. For everybody who gets charged repeatedly with drunk driving or driving without a license, there ought to be some very significant consequences. I don't happen to think that those people, all of them for the reasons that Teal just said, ought to be incarcerated, or that that's the answer, but there ought to be social programs, counseling programs, therapy programs for these people and their families to provide the kind of support and environment that enables them to stop engaging in the kind of irresponsible conduct that they do. But we as a society make choices, and we don't want to put money and resources into the kind of programs that will make our streets safe and that will protect our children from these kinds of events. And until we turn around our priorities and invest more money in the kinds of programs that would be far more pervasive to protect people and to provide resources to work with offenders, we're going to continue to find these tragedies popping up.
I want to go to Fred Hyun, who is the chair of the Hawaii Paroling Authority. You know, you are tasked with assessing risk and figuring out whether someone will reoffend. You know, I don't necessarily want to focus just on this individual, but really the mindset of someone who repeats the same infraction again and again and again. It's hard for a lot of us to understand that. From your years of experience, what can you tell us about the mindset of someone who behaves this way?
Well, you have repeat offenders, and there are some who, for whatever reason, whether it's drugs or a mental health issue, lack of family support or community support, may continually reoffend. So we have individuals, convicted felons, who do drive without a license, who do drive drunk, and who have police contact. And those are the type that the parole officer will note, and we will have to generally issue a no bail warrant and have them taken back, just to be safe. People sometimes say, well, you're pulling the guy back on a technical violation. Well, sure may be a technical violation, but it's what you need to do to keep the community safe. But there are different reasons why a person may be the habitual offender or repeat offender, yeah?
Chief Logan, I saw that you wanted to jump in there.
Yeah, so from my standpoint, it's looking at how much is society or the residents in the city and county of Honolulu, what is their tolerance to allowing this to continue? When do we start going to our elected officials? When do we start going to the state legislature and saying, hey, enough is enough, we've got to do more. There's something out there that we're not doing. What are we not doing? So, you know, the criminal justice system is a multi-legged stool. And each one of us that are here tonight have, other than our two family members, well, no, even the community has a leg of the stool. And if we're not all in sync and we're not all working properly, then that stool is out of balance. And I think that's where we're at right now. So how do we all get this back in balance, and so that we're holding people accountable, those that are rehabilitatable and that will not offend again, then we allow them through whatever processes there are, whether that's substance abuse or some other way, that they can do what they need to do to ensure that they won't reoffend. But those that have the habitual rehabilitation or can't, will continue to reoffend because of its habitual, they're not being held accountable. And that's what these families are grieving right now. Because people are not being held accountable, we have the situation we're in now. And so how do we do that better? I agree with, you know, Mr. Seitz in understanding we're not going to be able to fix all the problems, and just one simple solution is not going to answer the question. But we need to, as a community, as residents of the city and county of Honolulu, come together and be able to answer this as a community.
And that is really why we're here tonight,
Absolutely.
to continue that conversation. I want to, you know, emphasize that this is really not just an Oahu issue. This is a statewide problem. You know, we started out talking about that case in Kona. Chief Moszkowicz is here from Hawaii Island. What can you tell us about that case?
Again, not a whole lot of details about that particular case. You know, it's interesting when you flash the number of arrests and the number of citations and the number of violations. Again, that's all publicly available information. You can search by name. But what else is, the other part that's kind of interesting is what's in there and what it seems like versus, you know, what the actual facts are. So if cases don't get filed, so if there's an arrest that's not accepted, or like in the case that we were talking about earlier, where there's a case that's pending, there's not going to be anything in e-court kokua on that particular case. So there's actually a lot more to each of these individual stories. But you know what Chief Logan and Mr. Seitz were talking about in the ability of the community to make an investment in taking people who are first or second or third time offenders and figuring out what that secret sauce is to rehabilitate them and get them out of that cycle. The public defender was talking about earlier. To me, that's the real key to this conversation is how can we prompt legislators to make that investment? And I wish I knew what that investment was and what it would entail, right? If we knew what that thing was, and at this point, it's grown to an epidemic. I don't think any idea is basically too crazy to at least try.
Well, and I'm interested, one of the differences as far as we know between what happened in Kona and what happened here on Oahu is the intoxicant, as far as we know. And of course, these cases are still pending. But speaking broadly, especially with your experience, I know you did a lot of work with MAD, Mothers Against Drunk Driving. How often is substance use a part of these kinds of cases?
50 to 60% when you include alcohol and drugs. And the other commonality between the two cases we've talked about today is both of those cases involved hit and run, right? They're both failure to render aid cases where the suspect, regardless if it's a person we're talking about or not, that person committed that crime and then fled. And maybe that's the angle. Maybe it's those kind of cases that we attack first and look at an enhancement in those cases, because that's certainly a much smaller subset. But at least 50% of these cases statewide involve either alcohol or drugs or a combination of both as impairing substances.
And on that substance abuse issue, I want to go to Robert Locklear, who is a substance abuse counselor. We've heard Fred Hyun's thoughts about recidivism and, of course, the idea of substance abuse that the chief is mentioning there. For people who have those kinds of issues, are some of the enhancements that Steve Alm is suggesting, increasing jail time and things like that, is that a deterrent, or is there another way?
There's a lot of research out there, a lot of clinical research, evidence-based research, where the higher the consequence, the more mandated the legal recommendation for treatment increases the chances of success. As a substance abuse counselor working alongside probation officers, parole officers, we have to work together to help this individual or individuals like this person to have a fighting chance to change their behaviors. If not, if there aren't any resources available, right, this system, this cycle is just going to continue, right?
Steve?
Yeah, well, when it comes to felonies, they're all being put on probation. But, frankly, we figured out a way to really reduce substance abuse with whole probation. But that means probation officers giving quick consequences and people responding to that. Unfortunately, the judiciary is getting away from that, and it's not working the same way. But in misdemeanors, what was being discussed earlier, they're not even being put on probation. And they need to be put on probation to get services, whether it's mental health services, drug and alcohol services. So the courts can play, I think, a major role and use the leverage of the court system to help people get better.
I want to turn now to
Can I just add something?
Please.
The problem is, as Steve's office, the courts are understaffed. The probation officers are understaffed. And they can't maintain the kind of day-to-day contact or provide counseling and therapy or referrals for help to people who need it. So when you talk about an investment, we really need to invest a lot of money in beefing up the staff of the courts, of the prosecutor's office, of other people, so cases don't get lost in the cracks. The dismissal of cases for one reason or another, because they're not processed properly, because they're not processed in time, all of the technical reasons that allow people to fall into the cracks and walk away despite the fact that they present a danger to people in the community, we have to prevent that by making sure that we have adequate people available to provide the services that these offenders need and that the community needs to be safer.
I want to bring in Mr. Werner on this. Before we get to Kaulana's law, because there's been a lot of talk about changing the laws, and you were successful in doing that. First, if you would tell us a little bit about your son.
First of all, I want to thank you folks, and we have experts here tonight that can address a lot of the problems we have in our state. Kaulana was 19 years old. He was a happy-go-lucky kid. You know, April 24th, 2016, you know, I came out at 8:34. Just started getting dark. You know, when I heard, you know, something like a trash can got hit. So I came out and, you know, I just talked to him. He was gonna go run. But, you know, it was when your heart drops, you just get this feeling in you that, you know, something bad will happen. And so when I got across the street, came upon him, and it was him. For me, I got to hold him, and, you know, let him take his last breath. So Kaulana actually died in my arms. You know, as a father, that's the most devastating thing you can ever imagine. You know, we come into this world having our kids to lay us down to rest, not us laying them down. And that's exactly what we did, lay him down to rest. It was a tragic for me, my whole family, and our community, because he was very loved within the community. He would give his shirt off his back. I know times when, you know, he was at the beach and he got to save some tourists in the water. He loved the water. Kaulana, he was the water. He loved surfing, boogie boarding, and, you know, everything to do with the water. And, you know, he came home and he said, "Dad, I saved this tourist." And I said, "Boy, good. That's God's work, what you did." And, you know, he was so lovable. He was a big part, you know, within our family. He was loved by the whole family. You know, I got grandkids now, and I got daughters that, you know, it's like, it's a tragic thing that, you know, what we lost, you know, we got guys that commit this type of crime, whether they kill or, and they have second chances. You know, I'm for second chance, you know, but there's something that I'm never gonna get a second chance to have my son walk through the door, or even get married, or have grandkids. You know what I'm gonna do about it? You know, I don't want anybody else to go through what we've been going through. I mean, because it's the worst of the worst. You know, with Kaulana's law that we will implement, you know, I went to the legislation and, you know, we worked hard. It wasn't only me. We had a team there that got this bill through. And the only way this bill got through is the work of God.
And tell folks, for people who don't know, what that law actually accomplished.
So Kaulana's law is for those who commit and is impaired, drunk, or intoxicated, hit someone and flee the scene and don't come back to render aid. So what that does is give an extension of 10 more years added. So if the person that hit my son got charged for negligent homicide, which is a Class B felon, which is 10 years possibility probation. When you got manslaughter, which is reckless, which is 10 years to life, which is 20 years to life in prison. So for me, I'm wondering that why certain people, basically almost the same thing, get charged different. Whether it's a reckless, would fall probably under manslaughter, which is 20 to life, which is negligent, which is 10 years to this person walking free. And, you know, I've been seeing it all over the TV. And I know, I understand that, you know, our police department do what they gotta do to, and, you know, with Steve Elms there, and with, you know, I bring a lot of safety within the state of Hawaii, and thanks to Ed Sniffen, HPD, that supports me. I may never know, by bringing awareness of drinking and driving or doing drugs, how much lives that we may have saved by bringing this awareness to our state. And I just appreciate that, you know, I got people behind me, supporting me to save lives. Number one priority is, if it's to do with saving life, I think EDS, we can implement the raised crosswalks, speed bumps. And since we implementing that, as far as I know, there was 0 fatality within that area. A lot of the fatalities happen on the outside of these humps. I got kicked back in trying to bring that to our community, but I didn't care. They won't know unless they lose their loved one. They'll be out there holding sign with me and trying to slow these cars down, which I bring every year. And especially on Kaulana's, the day he got killed was this past Monday and Sunday. And I just thank HPD to bringing out the team to do sobriety checkpoint. I would never know how much got arrested, but I know I was there. And hearing the horns beeping, normally you won't hear horns beeping at you when you're trying to get drugs or drunks off the road. I may never know if they got guns off the road that night, or how much people that we saved. I would never know that. But all I know is we didn't get any fatality during that week. And I'm always going to be a strong advocate in supporting Sara, supporting the daughter, supporting my nieces, supporting everybody that is in our predicament and going through what we have been going through for the past 7 years. And I hope that, you know, we can bring this out and make a difference. If we can save one life, we can save 2 or maybe hundreds. I know it's all worth it in what I do.
Well, and you bring up a really interesting point, and that is where DOT comes in. Ed Sniffen is here from the State Department of Transportation. There are the laws, and then there are the roads themselves. We saw at Kapiolani Boulevard at that intersection, the speed humps were put in, the red light traffic cameras are there now. To what extent can then the roads themselves be a part of the solution?
I think they have to be. You just heard it tonight from all the experts, people that I have a lot of respect for in this room, especially the 2 parents of kids we lost, and their strength and integrity in their conviction and their messaging to the public. In general, law enforcement can't be everywhere. Courts can't address everything. I want to say in 2015, when we first started talking story about fatalities that occurred, Ben and I were talking about the sheer numbers, 107 fatalities per year on the system. There's a general apathy in society about that number. 107 fatalities every year. We can count that 107 people will die on the highways every year. But in general, it gets pushed off as accidents or acceptable in some way, shape, or form. There's no way you can add up any violent crime numbers to equal up to the fatalities that we have on our state highway system. And it's not just the Hawaii thing. 40,000 people die in the nation every year. You don't necessarily hear about it. You hear about it when it occurs, and that's it. So if the society that we have had the passion that you see in this room today, these numbers go down immediately. Ben just talked about it, 50 to 60% junkie drug driving. That's the reason for it. 30 to 35% excessive speeding. 15 to 25% distracted driving. Choices, all 3 of them, choices. We change those choices, 90% of the people go home tomorrow. 95 of the 107 that die every year go home tomorrow. But you don't see that though in society. There's an excusing of this occurring out. There was an incident in Waimanalo. A person killed a child in a stroller in a crosswalk at night, at dusk or whatever. When you see the report, the area legislator at the time said, "I'm going to have the DOT check these lights." They didn't talk about the person that ran from the scene. They didn't talk about the person who when she was picked up, was still legally drunk. Talked about the lights. Excused the whole situation to something that could generally be considered in the facility. So from my perspective, when we first started talking about this, we started telling everybody, make the right decision. If you make the right decision, 95 people go home. Didn't work. So we're going to make sure that the facility does it for them now. What we see I just talked about the reasons for the crashes, but the reason for every fatality is the speed. So if we can get the speed out of the system, we can save more lives, regardless if there's people driving drunk, regardless if there's people driving distracted or speeding. If we can make sure that there's speed management devices in the way, whether they're raised crosswalks or speed humps or roundabouts, things that require you to slow down, it'll allow you to react better to the system. It'll ensure, because you have a reduction in speed, that more people survive, and it'll ensure that you can make better decisions. So for us, we're going to try and make sure that the system can do that. We'll also help out with enforcement, with the photo enforcement that we have in red light cams. We're going to be pushing, we dropped a bill this year to see if we could pilot speed cams on the system. And we don't need them everywhere, but we need them in areas where we know that there's going to be work zones or school zones or even safety areas where we know that there's high incidence for the low volumes that we have. Kakunoho Road and the like, all those different areas where we see high crash fatalities. And it's not going to be like van cams. We're not going to try and trap you. We're not going to try and hide or anything. We'll put them up. We'll put up signs and say we're monitoring this area with speed cams. And if you speed, it's all on you, just to make sure that everybody starts making the right decisions a lot more.
You know, when you put those red light cameras in, everyone tonight who is so outraged, a lot of those same people said, no, I don't want those. I'd imagine you're going to get a lot of pushback on those speed cams.
And I don't care. I mean, really, I don't care. I mean, if we're talking about 107 fatalities that we could get down significantly, we're going to push them. We're going to make sure that we get everybody to just follow the law. I'm not asking everybody to slow down to zero. I'm not asking anybody to get this uncomfortable with their drives. Just follow the law.
Okay, I want to bring in Judge Lee and our audience, and thank you all of you who are calling in and writing in. Keep those questions coming. You too, of course, are a very important part of this conversation. Judge Lee, there's an interesting question here. Couldn't we use the forfeiture laws to take away or forfeit the car that is being driven by a person without a license? If the defendant doesn't own the car, the state can give notice or a warning to the registered owner and forfeit or take the car if the defendant is caught driving the same car without a license. Another person here, Ron and Kaneohe, a possible element in the Yara case, what about holding the owner of the car that he was using accountable? So, you know, to what extent could we seize vehicles, or, you know, is there another way? Because clearly, you know, the numbers that we laid out over a dozen times, including the month before driving without a license, those citations not seeming to make a difference.
Forfeiture of a car is a good idea. However, you need legislation that enables the prosecutor to make such forfeiture available. Right now, forfeiture is generally for crimes such as gambling, etc., and not for driving without a license or negligent homicide. So you need to change the law to get a forfeiture of a vehicle. But I wanted to point out some things that I was rather amazed when Ben threw the stats, because the stats reflect exactly what Ed said, that people don't treat serious crimes seriously. I mean, this is just an accident, driving without a license, no big deal. I was rather amazed when I heard Ben's discussion about the stats. I also agree with Eric in terms of resources. Okay, but you know, I think it's important that the judiciary distinguish the habitual from the regular driver driving without license people, and make that baby step to hold these people accountable. It cannot fall through the black hole. Okay, these driving without license cannot fall through the black hole. So the first step should be the courts. The courts need to step it up and take that first step. Okay, this person may not have been driving had they took that first step, you know, and you can't wait for the legislature to say, well, we're going to give you some money, but the governor has to approve it, and then we have to go do a study. We can't wait for that. So the judiciary has the stick that they can at least hold these people accountable. You have to understand, a lot of these offenders are creatures of habit, and if nothing happens to them, their idea is that I can do it again, because nothing happens to me. So the judiciary can make that distinction between the occasional driving without license and the habitual ones, okay, that was described. And the habitual ones, they could actually use their authority to hold these people accountable.
I want to bring in some more comments from the audience, and Chevy, I'd like to get your thoughts on these. When will justice be served for Sara? The suspect is supposedly out free. If he gets away with this, then other people will think they can get away with this too. Another person saying, actions speak louder than words. The law became soft and people took advantage. We're talking about the driver and why he is still driving. I'd imagine the fact that this gentleman has not been charged must weigh pretty heavily on you.
Well, that's my biggest concern. It's not just this one person, but there's many out there that drives without a license, habitually get caught with it. And I mean, what does the law say about offenders that does it 1, 2, 3 times? And I looked it up. There's really no consequences to that. Or even speeding. There's no really consequences. So these guys can just keep on speeding, keep on driving without a license. My hairdresser said, well, if these guys can drive without a license, we might as well just no drive without a license, you know? Just not have a license at all, if these guys can get away with it. So, you know, the law needs to change. I mean, these guys that, I can see the ones that, like what you were talking about, that's trying and they're making it hard on them in Honolulu. Yes, our cost of living is high here. But the ones that continually do it, I mean, they need to reap the repercussion, and there's none. I mean, could Sara be alive today if the guy was put in jail? I wouldn't know, you know? If the law stick their guns and say, you know, you've 12 counts of driving without a license, okay, let's put you in jail for a year or so. Did he even have that? Does anybody that drives without a license constantly and get caught went to jail? That's my question. And what about people that speed? Did they ever go to jail? I mean, like the report said, this guy had like 30-something record of speeding. I mean, did he even go to jail or get any consequences to that?
From our research, there was no jail given to this individual, but let's bring
For
you
anybody, we're going to find out in the future. We're going to be asking for jail on a third offense, driving without license, so that should separate out the ones that, you know, maybe their license expired. And even the stats are difficult in the last couple of years because of COVID and because of the governor's exemptions, because DMV's closed. They really were giving people some slack. But part of it is we have a number of really irresponsible people out there. And some of them are jerks who do not care about anybody else in the world. And no-fault insurance is a pet peeve of mine, because when people don't have insurance and they're driving, they are thumbing their nose at everybody else out there. If I hit you, you're on your own, whether it's a pedestrian or a person. And I realize, you know, people like to have their cars, but we have a good bus system here. They don't on Hawaiʻi Island, they do on Oahu. When I was a judge, I'd have people coming in from KAKOU, coming in from Kaneohe to get drug tested at court. And if they want to get somewhere, they will go. Because I would tell them, the guy would tell me, hey, Judge, I live so far away. I'd say, if you were trying to score dope, you would go anywhere on this island. And they say, yeah, that's true. So, you know, where there's a will, there's a way. So we will find out if the courts are willing to do it. And I think to the average citizen, the idea of going to jail is really scary. And so if that starts happening and it gets publicized, which we will certainly, you know, try to help you do, help the media do, we'll see. Maybe that will have an effect. They also should, for the ones that are drugs and alcohol a problem, they should get treatment for that. I'm totally in favor of it. But partly, we just have some entitled people who think I can do whatever I want and I don't care about anybody else.
There are a number of questions kind of following up on this person is writing from Kamuela on Hawaiʻi Island, so I'll bring you in. Why can't the police impound offenders' cars? What are the rules of taking?
The statutes don't let us do it. So there are a list of specified offenses that are in the Hawaii Revised Statutes. These are the offenses for which you can impound cars. And yeah, driving without a license, first offense, second offense is a petty misdemeanor offense. Third offense and beyond becomes a misdemeanor, a full misdemeanor, but almost all of those cases on the asset forfeiture side of the house are all felony cases.
There's a question from Lee in Kailua for Chevy tonight. What kind of changes would you like to see, either the law or to road safety? What kind of changes are you hoping for?
I would like to see the law change. I mean, for repeated offenders. I mean, we have it there, but it doesn't stick. I mean, when I looked at driving without a license, you can have a fine or the first offense is 30 days in jail or 30 days in jail. There's nothing to say, okay, if you hit the fourth driving without a license, you're going to jail. You know, it's like there's no consequences. So they think they can do it all the time. So there needs to be something that sticks and have consequences to people who don't care being on the street without a license, people who don't care speeding on the road, you know.
Ed, I want to bring you back in here. There are two comments here. The drivers in this state have the attitude that they can run the red light or not stop for people in the crosswalk because they feel they are in the right. Pat on Maui says, why do we have to wait to put in speed bumps only after someone dies? Why not put them all around the streets across our state?
So we haven't been waiting. That's the thing. We already have 116 speed humps statewide right now. There's another 60 that's going in. We made sure that we started looking at areas and considering where we have the most potentials for conflicts between pedestrians, bicyclists, and drivers. And that's in school zones. So in every school zone throughout the state, anytime there's a crossing across a state facility to a school, there's going to be a raised pedestrian crosswalk there, bar none. We're even working with the counties to ensure that we start installing it on their jurisdictions as well. There's 15 areas that we're looking at just for the city because we know we can do it faster.
Teal, I want to bring you back in. The Stephen Waikiki, the panel needs to stop sugarcoating this. This is not about not having money to pay for insurance. We are talking about habitual offenders who drive recklessly, speed, and hit and run. For the drivers that we're talking about in that case, you know, what are your thoughts tonight?
So again, I would offer a distinction between habitual offenders that are getting multiple citations for driving without a license, without any kind of dangerous behavior, and dangerous drivers. Like Ed Sniffen pointed out, the majority of accidents and fatalities are happening because of excessive speeding, because of distracted drivers, because of people that are intoxicated. I do think they're very different groups. And I don't think a blanket solution of sending everyone that gets a driving without a license citation to jail is necessarily the answer. We have to think about who we're sending to jail. We want to send people that are actually dangerous members of our community that pose a risk to our community, dangerous drivers to jail. Sending everyone to jail puts us at risk because our jails are getting very close to being overcrowded, and at some point, if they are overcrowded, there's going to be issues with the state in terms of safety, and the state's going to have issues about who they're going to have to keep in custody. So the judges are going to have to make difficult decisions, which they already do, about who is actually a risk to our community.
Can I add on to that? Because in Hawaii County, to bring in more of a statewide perspective, what you're saying is absolutely 100% true. There's an article in Civil Beat a few weeks ago where the administrative judge from our circuit went to Hawaii Community Correctional Facility, which is basically our only jail on the island. And what he witnessed is appalling, right? There's over 280 people in a place that's max designed for 200, and that's with 3 people in cells that have 2 beds. There's people that are sleeping in dry rooms where there's no running water. There's people, sleeping in visiting areas. So when the judge goes there and they experience that, their immediate reaction, and this is what the judge said, like I told the other judges, don't send anybody there. Because there's legitimately no room. And to your point about people distinguishing between D-walls and excessive speeding, that same year, 2021, where we had 15,000 driving without a license cases, we had 4,400 cases of excessive speed. Of those, 95% were dismissed. So it's the same system. It's 2 different problems, and it's definitely subsets of people, but it's the same system failures, in my opinion.
Hyun, I want to bring you in, especially because we are talking about, it all flows together, right? If we don't have enough space for people to be sent to, then the instinct is then to dismiss a case or work something else out, and then we end up in perhaps the situation we're in now. What are your thoughts on what Chief Moszkowicz just shared about our jail situation and how that impacts all of this?
Well, the jail. Well, let me go back a little bit in history because I used to see what used to happen in traffic court at Honolulu District Court for many years. And traffic type offenses seem to take a backside to criminal matters. And when you want to have so many cases that get consolidated and a whole bunch get dismissed just so you can get a guilty plea on one, that makes a difference too. On the rap sheet, you'll know 20, 30, 40 type of driving without license, but you'll see many of them have been dismissed so that you can get a conviction on one or two more serious type offenses. I mean, that's just a matter of fact, and you can look at the rap sheet. Jails are going to be crowded when you start sending people to jail. That's just the bottom line. Difference between jail and prisons, jails is going to be for short term. So there needs to be consequence, and like Steve points out, it has to be immediate. Otherwise, it's of little consequence. That's just basic psychology 101. So there has to be firm guidelines that are enforced and done as soon as possible. Otherwise, it has no effect. That's why so many people feel entitled and they speed around and they do crazy things, and you see them on the highway all the time. And I'm asking myself, where's the cop when you need them? But the cops are overwhelmed and they're overloaded and they can't be every place at one time.
Robert, I want to bring you back into this conversation because we focused a lot on, on the penalties, right? But what are some ways that you think this could be addressed, perhaps given your background with substance abuse counseling?
Just treatment. Mandating, going into an outpatient or inpatient program immediately, right? But even those programs, we only have a handful on the island. Bed space to amount of counselors, CSACs like myself, there's only a handful of us, and there's not enough to entice them to come here to Hawaii, right? This is a big, big problem, and there's not enough for us to go around to help and provide that empathy, that support, but also that guidance to change this behavior and to stop repeating and going over and over again of repeating these laws that keep getting broken.
Steve, I see you want to jump
That's
in.
one of the things that the governor, the legislators are going to have to deal with is we need money for the Department of Public Safety to clean up all of the jails. OCCC is in terrible shape, but the neighbor island jails are worse. And it's just, part of that is money. And honestly, most people don't care about inmates. If you have a family member or you know somebody locked up, you're going to care about it. But to a lot of other people, out of sight, out of mind. That's why we send all these guys to Saguaro prison on the mainland in Arizona. But even then, the inmates tell me, I'd rather go there and do my time because that private prison offers all these programs. Because Judge Lee and I are probably the two toughest sentencers in circuit court. But even then, when they go to prison, you want them to get chances for rehabilitation. So because they're going to come out in 3 or 4 years, most people. And when they come out, we want them to be law-abiding citizens. But part of the answer is the way Department of Public Safety is run, Department of Corrections soon. But part of it is just money to fix up those facilities.
Chief, I want to bring you in.
May I also add something to that?
Please.
I mean, there is also an alternative to prisons. We don't have to send people to prisons. We can create community institutions that are less than prisons, but offer ways to remove people from society until they're capable of rejoining society without it actually being a prison. They're a lot cheaper. They can be group homes of various kinds, but we have never really explored that option in Hawaii because basically the official line has been we either send people to corrections, we spend billions and billions of dollars building new prisons, but the Oversight Commission and other groups have proposed that we go in a different direction in Hawaii for the bulk of people who don't need to be locked up under the conditions that our prisons currently provide.
Well, just to counter that, this caller from Pearl City says these repeat offenders keep doing it because they don't feel any pain. Some of these guys only learn from harsh punishment. I think there is a pain that this case has caused in our community, and a lot of people want to see what they feel is justice, and for that, it feels like harsh punishment. What do you say to that caller?
I don't disagree with that sentiment, that for people who commit horrendous crimes, punishment is a major factor that is really appropriate. But for the bulk of people who need to be removed from society, they can be placed in other kinds of institutions that protect society and also ensure when they're released from those programs that they are better capable of performing their obligations in a societal way. We don't have to send them to prison in order to accomplish that. We need to step in at an earlier stage, take people out of society, and do what we can to prevent them from being repeat offenders. And there are ways to do that without having to send them to prisons at enormous cost for what we're now providing in terms of our incarceration rates.
I want to bring in the chief. Oh, please go ahead.
I think as victims, as I can speak for a lot of victims, to me, what is it? Lock them up right off the top. You do the crime, you do the time. As victims, as I can speak for Chevy too, and a lot of the victims out there, is that the solution? For us, yeah, that's a solution that we can, get justice for. But is that the overall solution? Maybe not. I mean, when you determine between a crash and an accident, to me, an accident is when I get a coffee cup or you got a water there and you hit it with your elbow and it falls off the table. That's what in me, it's an accident. When you get a crash, it's something 100% preventable that could have been stopped. But whether they were intoxicated, I mean, if you drink, get intoxicated, get drunk, however way you put them, and when you enter into the road, there's a possibility you can kill someone. If not killing yourself, kill our loved ones. And that's exactly what we're going through. So, as victims, as me and her can sit here, nobody know what we've been through down deep. I know I can look at her and say, Sara, I know what your daughter, Chevy, I know what you're going through. I can tell her that. Not too much guys that been in our shoes can actually, she could tell me that back too, and I can relate exactly what she's telling me, because it's really hurt. We know we have a two-tiered justice system, right? It's something that is 100% preventable. You get choices that you make in life. I'm not a perfect guy. I made a lot of mistakes in my time. But I just thank God the mistakes I made, that I could build up on them and become a better person today in society. Like I said, some guys get second chance. We didn't. So determining on fighting, forget the criminals or the killers, out free, for us is like, it's a no-no.
Well, let's bring your voice in that. I mean, do you feel that your voice is being heard throughout this process?
No. I mean, like he said, we're never going to see our children walk through that door. You guys won't feel what we feel. You guys can say all that you guys want to say about reforming these people. Unless you guys are in our shoes and not see your children again, you guys won't know what we feel. Every day, I just celebrated my daughter's birthday on Friday. Her twin had to celebrate it without her sister. Do you guys know how painful that was for her? She can't even tell her mother how she feels because she's afraid to tell me how she feels. On her birthday, you know where she went? To a therapist. Where is this guy? Does anybody know how we feel? No. My daughter had to celebrate her birthday without her sister. She always tells me, we were supposed to grow up old together. We were supposed to go to college together. Unless you guys know how it feels as parents losing our loved ones. You guys got to be in our shoes. If it happened to you, you guys would be fighting to bring the law down. You guys would be fighting to say, we need to bring justice. We need to change the law. You guys don't know how we feel, so you guys can talk about all of this. But the law needs to change. There needs to be consequences to the people. I'm not just saying the people that, oh yeah, drove without a license and they feel sorry for what they did. I'm talking about habitual offenders that constantly do it. The same name comes up every time in court. And they don't pay for their actions. It's like a slap in the wrist. And we pay for it. The parents that lose a loved one pays for it. And what does the judges do? Just slap them on the wrist. Give them a fine. You guys say, oh, yeah, jail time. We cannot put them in jail because our jail is overloaded. Then do something about the jail. We built all these other things, like the rail, for crying out loud, that never ends. Why couldn't we use that money to build better jail system? Instead, we send our guys, pay the money to send our guys to another jail cell in the mainland. Using that money, we could have used that money to build a better system, a jail system. Reform our guys here. Let them come out better people. If we help change the people in jail, then maybe we would have a better community. Put our money to something that will help our community. Our children are our next generation. My daughter, she'll never go to college. She'll never get married. And my poor daughter, her twin, gotta live every day passing her sister's room. We never went in her room since she was gone.
I'm so sorry. And, you know, I think one of the things that you said really struck me, which is, where is this guy? Right, and I think that that is what a lot of people in our community are very interested to know. And Chief, you know, I know you said that it takes a long time for these investigations to get processed, but who is to say that this individual is not on the road tonight?
We don't know. I mean, it's unfortunate. Where did he get the vehicle in the first place? You know, it wasn't his, and if it wasn't his, whose was it, right? And so what else is out there that is going to stop these people? And I agree with Chevy, absolutely. What is a society going to tolerate before we actually start changing rules, changing laws? Because as what was said earlier, HPD, we can't be everywhere. You know, we have probably up to 900 officers at any given day out there in the community trying to protect everyone in uniform, doing what they need to do. But oh, by the way, you've added, not you personally, but society has added since the 80s so much on law enforcement that we can't even do just basic enforcement because we're doing all society's other issues because there's no money to help with mental health crisis people, with drug addiction people on the streets, with homeless situations that are causing criminal activity that we've got to be addressed. We get 1 million calls, almost 1 million 911 calls into our system every year. And probably half of that are emergency 911 calls where we're actually sending someone to, and a majority of those are service calls for unrelated criminal activity or non-criminal activity. So that's officers are not doing what we've asked them to do, what our mission asks us to do. We're maintaining public order, yes, that's part of our mission, but we're out there doing social services stuff, not criminal activity and deterring crime. We're still out there as much as we can be, but we're trying to balance, you know, the safety of every citizen resident here and our visitors in the city and county of Honolulu, but even Chief Ben is doing it on the Big Island. So, you know, how do we help the law enforcement officers do more of what we need to do to help keep our streets safe because we're not doing these other things that other services are capable of, the state and city, that would provide resources to help relieve the law enforcement officer from doing all. They're out there doing yeoman's work. They're doing fantastic what they can do. But we need help too.
Yeah, Judge, I want to get your perspective on this. You know, we've talked a lot about different things that can change, you know, and some of them will take decades. You know, building another prison is something that the legislature has been talking about for a long time. But in the immediate short term, when you look at a case like this, who dropped the ball?
I don't want to really point fingers, but I think
let me rephrase the question.
We need to take baby steps. And part of the baby steps is that when this person came before the court had this person's record. And that, assuming the record was true, because I don't know his record, okay, but assuming his record was true, that should have been a red flag, okay, at that point. That should have been a red flag that this person should, his or her case should not have been treated just as a mere traffic ticket. It was something more serious. There's an underlying problem, and therefore the sentence that the person would have gotten might have been serious, much more serious than maybe a slap on the wrist that you say, okay? I don't want to say that the judge who handled the case dropped the ball, or the police dropped the ball, or the prosecutors dropped the ball, but we need to move forward, okay? We can't bring your daughter back, and I apologize for that. Okay?
But I want changes.
Yeah, but
I'm
we need to take baby steps, and one of the baby steps is perhaps having the courts take these cases more seriously. Like Ed said, it's just an accident. No, it's not an accident. It's a crime, okay? And the judges has to balance stuff. I understand that, and I agree with you. You can't throw everybody in jail. But if this person's record was as horrendous as we are told, that should have been a red flag at the get-go, and the judge should have stepped in and done something, at the very least.
So, Judge, how does that happen, though? Right? I mean, I get it. We're not going to get any judge that's sitting to be on the panel today for a lot of obvious reasons. But as a former judge, right? What would have made you think twice or made you change your perception as a judge in these kind of cases? Is it, Mad used to bring court monitors in, so there was somebody in the courtroom with a notebook keeping track. Is that what it is, or what do you think?
Well, for district court judges, their job is really difficult because at any given day they have 100 to 150 cases a day. So it's really difficult, but it has to do with the judge's moral and ethics. In other words, the judge has to have some compassion and moral to know to do what's right and not just move this case through just because it's a number, okay? If you look at things in the past, it's not happening now, but in the past, whenever a judge did something that was very controversial against what the public wants, the judge's name was always there. Judge so-and-so did this, or Judge so-and-so sentenced this. Now they don't even mention which judge. And therefore, we need to hold judges responsible too.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Just like we hold the driver responsible, judges have to be responsible too.
Exactly.
So judges have to make good decisions themselves.
And Steve, I want to bring you, you've been a judge, now you're a prosecutor. We talked about legislative changes, that will take a long time. I want to rephrase the question that I asked Judge Lee, which is not necessarily who dropped the ball, but what adaptations can be made now so that we don't have to wait?
Well, I really think that our judges are compassionate, they're bright, they're trying to make sure people have a fair trial, but I honestly don't think they think part of their job is public safety. If I was I was a circuit court judge like Randy was, but if I was a district court judge, the first time somebody was caught stealing, they'd get a deferral, keep their records clean. The second time, they'd get a couple days in jail. When I was a judge, these misdemeanor campaign spending cases came in. I gave them all like 10 days in jail. I was the only judge who gave anybody any jail time. It just is it's a culture of leniency, honestly. And I think when the light is shown on it, and that's why we'll see what happens with these cases. And it's always challenging to try to make mandatory jail time because you're going to get all this pushback. You're going to give mandatory jail time in every single case for a driving without license. What about a sex assault in the 4th degree? What about an egg harm for? That's a difficult area. There's room in the statutes right now to give jail time, and we're going to be asking for it on like third offense for no-fault insurance, third offense driving without license, and we'll start catching some of these habitual guys if the judges will give them jail time.
But to be clear, the laws don't need to be changed. The laws are there.
Honestly, I don't think so. I think the laws allow for jail time right now. They allow for prison time for felonies. But it's really rare to go down to circuit court in a felony and see anybody get a prison sentence. And I mean, jail is OCCC, pretrial detention, or for probation violations. Prison is halava, women's saguaro. You almost never see anybody get any prison time unless the statute mandates it. When I was a judge, if it was a violent felony, I would often send them to prison the first time, but I was alone. You know, I was the first, and maybe Judge Lee, but when I was appointed to circuit court in Honolulu, I was the first career prosecutor to be appointed to circuit court in Honolulu ever. The path was through the defense bar to get to be a judge. And then when Mark Bennett was Linda Lingo's Attorney General, he made it his life mission to get former prosecutors on there. And now there's a balance, but it's still a pretty lenient system. And the judges have it within themselves to do that. We've got to make sure we're doing our job by prosecuting the cases and by asking for jail. And if we weren't doing that enough in the past, shame on us. We're going to do it now. And then we'll see what happens.
Well,
But it starts with the courts. The courts have the ability to hold these people responsible. But I also think that the law could be better. When I say the law could be better, you could have an habitual driving without license or traffic offender, a statute whereby if it's the third or fourth offense, it's now a felony. We did that with the DUI cases. Why can't we do it with the traffic offenses, the habitual ones?
Mr. Werner, I see you want to jump in.
You know, for us, we put our whole trust in our justice system to get what we need to get results out there for those who break the law. I understand the court system, I understand the investigation. We gotta let HPD conduct the investigation. We gotta let the prosecutors do them. Because if there's a minor thing within that investigation, things can be dismissed. And I'm pretty sure these guys, they're experts. I'm just, you know, through experience that, you know. And when that thing gets dismissed, these criminals and killers can walk free. So we, Chevy and I pretty much can vouch for all the victims out there that we put our whole trust in the experts, and that's our court system, our justice system.
Fred, go ahead.
Just to touch upon and give some perspective here. So what Ben talks about his numbers, and I think what Eric brings out about alternative resources, some perspective that 2019 to 2022, my understanding of the stats show that the courts put on probation between 19 and 24,000 people on probation, felony and misdemeanors. Felony and misdemeanors on probation. So if any of those gets revoked to an open term, your prisons will be way over census, way overcrowded. I'm not saying that, you know, that will happen, but the courts are doing, as far as I can see, the best job that they can with the resources that they can, but they need more resources. And I do know that they go to the ledge every year and they can't get more courtrooms or more judges or more staff. So therein lies another problem. But there it has to be a balance between things.
I want to get to just a couple of these because we have so many callers that are writing in, and I really appreciate it. There's a ton of stuff for you, Mr. Sniffen, you know, and a lot of people really wanting the roads themselves to be changed. So I'm just going to read a few, and you can kind of respond generally. Mike in Hilo says, why don't you put speed bumps before crosswalks instead of making the crosswalk itself raised? In my neighborhood, the drivers still speed right through. Marilyn and Mililani, why is it taking so long to install the red light cameras? What about lowering the speed limit to 45 miles an hour to prevent more fatalities? We also need to make sure that drunken driving isn't brought down to reckless driving. Speed bumps and traffic cameras to slow down the traffic is not the answer, says Ted in YNI. The real problem is our roadways are too small to accommodate the cars we have on the island. The roadways have not changed enough in the last 50 years to make an impact. I think we could do a whole infrastructure show. But what about, you know, responding to some of what these folks have said? And as the caller, as they point out, this is not just an Oahu issue. We have someone from Hilo as well, and I think across the islands you would hear people saying the same thing.
So the raised crosswalks are a national standard. nationally is showing that the numbers are better than just speed humps that are preceding crosswalks. We use speed humps preceding crosswalks in areas where we have ADA issues, but the raised crosswalk always works better, mainly because it not only provides that driver that reason to slow down, but also elevates the pedestrian in the driver's mind. Those are the two big things that the raised crosswalks do. If we cannot do that, we'll do speed humps. Speed humps and red light cameras are not the answer. It's the driver. The driver is the answer. We're putting them in place right now because the driver is not doing their job. So I'm going to make sure that the system does it for them. If the driver does their job, I don't have to do any of these things anymore. The system is 100% safe if the drivers are following the law. Now, that all being said, we try to make sure that we work together on all of these different issues to bring the safest system possible. One of the callers that talked about the roads being too small. In general, there's nowhere for us to build anymore. We're a landlocked state with no place to go. There's houses on both sides of the roads, and no matter where you go. We got the system we got. We're using a lot more technology to make sure that we can make our system more efficient. But if people are expecting us to build new roads throughout the state, it's not going to happen. There's not enough resources, not enough land to do it. So we're going to make sure we live with the roadways that we have. We've got to make them safer. So right now, what we're seeing is if the roads are bigger, there's more speed. If there's more speed, there's more fatalities. So you're not going to see more speed in different areas. We can reduce the speed limits as much as we want to, but if we don't change the system, if we don't put things in a way to make sure we manage speed limits don't matter. Because again, as General Logan, I keep calling him General Logan, Joe said, there's not enough officers to be sitting at different areas throughout the state. So we're going to make sure that the system is built to ensure that we minimize the speed as much as possible.
Eric, I know you want to jump in.
Yeah, we started out talking about a number of things, but I think what has come through this experience, to me most importantly, is that the kids who went to school with Sara were outraged at what happened. And I would hope that outrage will continue. Because as we said early on, we have incidents and people express their concerns and then we forget about it and we go on to the next one. But I think the best hope we have is for people not to forget and for people to demand that we do a better job of protecting our kids particularly, but our citizens generally, and that we demand of our officials that they do everything they can to provide sufficient resources to provide the most protection that we're entitled to. And if we forget this incident 5 months from now, 6 months from now, then we will not have learned anything. Yeah. But I think, frankly, there is some hope because the kids at McKinley High School, the other kids who came out to join them when they had demonstrations, that's got to continue. And we can't forget, because then there'll be another tragedy that will even be more upsetting.
Yes. There are so many people who are writing in with all of these suggestions. I have this one from Tom. Chief Logan, do officers have the ability to know when they stop a habitual offender? Do we have some type of technology to distinguish the drivers? When you run, a license or lack thereof, are you able to tell right away that this is a habitual offender and maybe something should be done right away? Not necessarily.
So unless the officer has access to KAKOU and can look up somebody's, but then that takes time, right? And so the courts and the legal experts in our judicial system have allowed officers that we're not allowed to hold people for long periods of time in a traffic stop kind of engagement. So we have to be diligent in our work and write citations and hopefully that the system, whether that's at the prosecution or when they're in front of a judge, trying to say they are not guilty of the offense that they were cited for. At that point in time, it would show up that they're habitual. Because our job is to initiate people into this criminal justice system, whether that's arrest for criminal offenses or for writing citations such as traffic offenses and pushing them into the systems of the courts. And then at that point, really our function is done, other than coming to court maybe later on to testify. And it's up to the system, the rest of the legs of the stool of the criminal justice system to take hold from there and to take action. I mean, so we don't have access or readily available access to look at somebody's record on citation.
Honestly, though, the technology part is the easy fix. Yeah. For us to change the programming is very simple because the state systems are all connected. The issue is, even if I know that that person is a habitual offender, I'm left with the same driving without a license violation. So the person's going to get the same citation they would have gotten otherwise, or they're going to get arrested based on the circumstances. And that's right where our officers are today anyway, without that knowledge. So if there's going to be some sort of enhancement or the ability to take the car or whatever, then absolutely, we can make that technology work to enable that functionality.
And to piggyback on what Ben just said, if the officer makes arrest in lieu of writing a citation, the individual gets arrested. If they can't bail out, they spend the night in jail. They go to court the next day. More than likely than not, time served, thank you very much, out you go. And so that's not the way to do business either.
We are almost out of time, but Leonard from Nanakuli has a pretty strong statement here. The majority of the panel should really pay attention to the two parents who lost their children, not just talk about there being short-staffed, traffic lights, and safety checks. I want to make sure that the two of you get the last word tonight. So Chevy, let's start with you. You know, what do we take away from this? You know, what are your final thoughts?
We need to make a difference to save more lives. That's what I'm here for. I'm not asking for speed bumps all over the place, but for habitual offenders, that we do something about it. Whatever it is, let's save another life. Or more. It's like, my daughter had to be an example and brought to light what our law was like. I mean, it had to take my daughter's life. So make a difference, at least for Sara's sake, make a difference. Because don't let her die in vain. Let's save another life, another child's life.
Mr. Werner, let's give you the last word. We have about a minute left.
I'd like to really thank everybody for being here. You know, this was the experts that we could address you know, a lot of concerns, especially when you lose loved ones. And all I can do is keep bringing awareness about drinking and driving out there. And what I want to do is take it to the schools. We need to educate our kids so they can sometimes educate their parents where they can take the keys away if they know the parents is drinking. And I'm never going to stop bringing, you know, took me to lose a loved one, to keep fighting so we can protect innocent victims out there.
Thank you so much. This is an issue, of course, without an easy solution. That's exactly why we are here tonight, to bring the key stakeholders together for a deeper understanding and hopefully a way forward. We really want to thank all of our guests and to those of you at home for being a part of tonight's discussion. We will be back next month for another KAKOU to talk about Hawaii's brain drain. Our state is exporting one of our greatest assets, our young people. How do we convince our best and brightest to make their lives here in Hawaii? Are they simply better off leaving? Bottom line, if I'm a student, should I stay or should I go? We do hope you join us then. I'm Yunji de Nies. Until next time, aloha.
This program was made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you.
Local broadcasts of KAKOU are made possible by the support of viewers like you. Mahalo. And by Young Brothers, providing quality service you can count on, connecting our island communities for over 120 years as the state's leading inter-island freight transportation company.
You're watching PBS Hawaii, supported by viewers like you. It's not just storytelling, it's advancing Hawaii's musical legacy. PBS Hawaii, home is here.